The stars did not disappear. They hesitated. Not all of them. Not everywhere. Just a narrow band of sky, stretching across the outer edge of mapped space, where long-range observation arrays had been quietly collecting data for decades without incident. At 2:11 station time, telescope array K9 flagged the first irregularity. At 2 hours 11 minutes and 3 seconds, it flagged it again. At 2 hours 11 minutes and 5 seconds, it stopped attempting to classify what it was seeing and instead marked the data with a tag that had not been used in 73 years. Anomaly, non-compliant with known physics. 3 seconds later, identical alerts triggered across 6 separate monitoring stations positioned light minutes apart. That should not have been possible. Not unless the event they were observing was large enough. That distance no longer mattered. On Kepler Border Station Bravo, the night duty officer, Lieutenant Armin, leaned forward in his chair and replayed the feed for the 4th time. The stars weren't gone. That was the problem. They were still there. Just dimmer. As if something vast had passed in front of them, not blocking the light entirely, but reducing it, like a hand hovering over a flame without quite touching it. He adjusted the spectral filters. No distortion. No gravitational lensing. No radiation interference. No known explanation. Run a cross-confirmation, he said. The system responded immediately. Confirmed. Multiple stations report identical data. Armin exhaled slowly. That made it worse. Across the network, reports began to compile. Different stations. Different officers. Different phrasing. Same conclusion. Something was in that region of space. Something large enough to affect starlight across a measurable arc. And whatever it was moving. At 2:14, the automated tracking systems attempted to calculate trajectory. They failed. Not because the object was too fast, but because there was no single object. There were many. The system updated, then paused, then updated again. Each revision increasing the count. Each revision making less sense than the last. At 2:16, the tracking interface did something unusual. It stopped displaying numbers, and instead displayed a message. Count exceeds reliable parameters. Lieutenant Armin stared at the screen. For a moment, he considered the possibility that this was a sensor error, a software glitch, a calibration fault, something small, contained, fixable. Then the stars dimmed further. Not dramatically. Just enough that he didn't have to check the readings to know it wasn't an illusion. He opened a priority channel. His voice, when he spoke, was controlled, precise, professional. Kepler command, this is Station Bravo. The pause. We are observing a large-scale stellar occlusion event across Sector K9. Another pause. He looked at the screen again. At the growing absence that wasn't an absence. At the movement that wasn't behaving like movement. He finished the sentence carefully, requesting confirmation that this is not already explained. The reply came back faster than expected. That was the first thing that made his stomach tighten. Station Bravo, you are not the first to report. A brief hesitation on the other end. The kind that professionals are trained not to let through. We need you to keep watching. Armin looked back at the sky. At the dimming line cutting across it. At the slow, deliberate shift of something too large to name. And for the first time since his shift began, he had the distinct, unwelcome sense that whatever was out there was not just passing through. It was arriving. The first object appeared at 2:19. Not visually. Not at first. It registered as a distortion in the data stream. An interruption so clean it looked intentional, like a missing word in an otherwise perfect sentence. Then the sensors corrected themselves. And the distortion became a shape. Contact, Armin said quietly. The word felt insufficient. The object had no visible propulsion signature. No thermal wake. No measurable energy output that matched any known drive system. Simply so was there. One moment, empty space. The system attempted classification. Failed. Attempted again. Failed faster. Unidentified mass. Scale exceeds database parameters. Armin leaned closer. How big? He asked. The system did not answer immediately. When it did, it hesitated, processing cycles stretching longer than normal. Estimated size. Comparative analysis required. Then it pulled reference objects. Cities. Mountain ranges. Artificial habitats. None of them were large enough. The system updated again. Approximate scale. Exceeds planetary urban threshold. Armin didn't speak. The second object arrived 11 seconds later. This time, the sensors didn't hesitate. They simply expanded the model. Then a third. Then 5 more. They didn't emerge from a single point. They appeared along the dimmed band of sky, each one occupying a position that, when mapped, formed something disturbingly precise. Formation, Armin whispered. At 2:21, the system tried to count them. Then 17. Then 26. Each update overriding the last before it could fully register. By 2:23, the count reached 39. And stopped. Not because there were no more, but because the system could no longer guarantee accuracy. It did something no one on the station had ever seen before. It initiated a self-check. Then a partial reboot. As if reality itself had exceeded its operating limits. Across the observation deck, no one spoke. Not because they had been told to remain silent, but because silence had become the only appropriate response. Armin switched to manual visualization. He needed to see it. Not numbers. Not classifications. Something real. The display resolved. And for a moment, his brain refused to process what it was looking at. The objects were not uniform. Not identical. But they shared a design language. Towering structures layered upward in impossible geometry, like cities that had grown vertically until structure gave way to intention. Edges that did not reflect light correctly. Surfaces that seemed to absorb it. And they were positioned with purpose. Not drifting. Not scattered. Arranged. Armin overlaid the movement vectors. They weren't converging. They weren't spreading. They were aligning. Slowly. Deliberately. Like something writing itself across space. Behind him, another officer finally spoke. What are they doing? No one answered. Because the pattern was becoming clear. Not in the data. In the shape. Armin zoomed out. Further. Further. Until the entire formation filled the screen. And then, it clicked. Not randomly placed. Not tactically positioned. Structured. Segmented. Curved in places where curves had meaning. Angular where angles mattered. The realization did not arrive as a thought. It arrived as recognition. They're not forming a perimeter, Armin said slowly. He adjusted the grid overlay. Removed the coordinate lines. Let the shapes stand on their own. They're forming. He stopped. Because saying it out loud would make it real. Across 6 monitoring stations, 6 different officers reached the same conclusion within seconds of each other. Not a fleet formation. Not a defensive spread. Not an attack vector. A pattern. A message. And it was still being written. At 2:26, the final objects appeared. No distortion. No delay. Just sudden, complete presence. The formation stabilized. The stars behind it dimmed further. Not gone. Just hidden enough. Armin stared at the screen. At the massive arrangement stretching across space. At the impossible geometry of it. The system finally updated one last time. Total contacts, unknown. Formation, non-random. Then, after a pause longer than any before. Pattern detected. Armin didn't breathe. Begin analysis, he said. Because whatever had just arrived had not come quietly. It had come to be understood. The analysis took 43 seconds. That alone was unusual. A pattern of this scale, this complexity, should have taken minutes at minimum, even with priority processing. Instead, the system returned a result almost immediately. Not because it was simple, but because it was familiar. On Kepler Station Bravo, the alert appeared across every active screen at once. Linguistic structure identified. Armin frowned. That's not possible, someone said behind him, because there was no known language that operated on that scale. No written system that used objects the size of cities. No syntax that stretched across light seconds. And yet, the system continued. Cross-reference in progress. Then it began listing matches. Not one. Not two. 7. 7 separate linguistic databases. 7 unrelated species archives. 7 extinct civilizations whose languages had only survived in fragments, reconstructed through centuries of academic work. And every single one. Not perfectly. Not symbol for symbol. But structurally. Conceptually. Meaningfully. Armin felt something tighten in his chest. Display translation, he said. The system hesitated. Not a delay. The pause. As if confirming the result again. Translation consensus achieved. The word appeared. Simple. Unavoidable. Inevitable. No one spoke. Not because they didn't understand it, but because they understood it immediately. Across 6 stations, 6 rooms fell into the same silence. Because the word was not descriptive. It was not informational. It was declarative. It did not explain what the fleet was. It explained what would happen. At HEC command, the message arrived as a priority cascade. Every department received it simultaneously. Astrophysics. Xenolinguistics. Defense. Diplomatic registry. 7 independent analysis teams verified the result within 2 minutes. Each one hoping, quietly, that the others would disagree. None of them did. Dr. Elian Rao, senior xenolinguist, stared at the compiled data on his screen. He had spent 28 years studying dead languages. Languages from species that no longer existed. Languages that had ended mid-sentence because the civilizations that spoke them had ended with them. And he recognized the structure immediately. Not the words. The intent. This isn't communication, he said. No one in the room responded. Because they were all thinking the same thing. This is, he searched for the right word. Then found it. Introduction. On Kepler Station Bravo, Armin replayed the formation again. Now that he knew what he was looking at, he couldn't unsee it. The curves weren't arbitrary. The spacing wasn't random. Every ship, every massive, impossible structure, was positioned with precision. Not for efficiency. Not for defense. For clarity. They wanted us to read it, someone said quietly. Armin nodded. Yes. The second realization came slower. The languages. He pulled up the cross-reference list. Species A, extinct, 12,000 years. Species B, extinct, 8,400 years. Species C, extinct, 19,000 years. All different. All unrelated. All translating to the same concept. He felt a chill. They didn't just write a word, he said. They wrote it in languages that don't exist anymore. At HEC command, that detail spread faster than the original translation. Because it changed everything. This wasn't a first contact scenario. Not in the way they had trained for. This wasn't discovery, exploration, accidental encounter. This was pattern recognition. They had done this before. Many times. In the analysis chamber, Dr. Rao leaned back in his chair. Slowly, carefully. Do we have any record, he asked, of those species ending naturally? No one answered immediately. Because the answer was already being searched. Then it came back. Data incomplete. Causes of extinction, unknown/unresolved. Rao closed his eyes for a moment. Of course they are, he said quietly. Back on Kepler Station Bravo, the stars dimmed again. Not dramatically. Just enough to notice. The formation held. Perfect. Unchanging. Waiting. Armin looked at the words still displayed on his screen. Inevitable. He tried to think of it logically. To break it down. To reduce it to something manageable. It was just a word. But it wasn't. It was a claim. A conclusion. Presented before the conversation had even started. At 2:31, the next alert triggered. Energy signature detected. Armin's head snapped up. Where? The system highlighted a region. Not from a single ship. From the space between them. Source unclear, the system reported. Which meant there was no source. Or something that didn't behave like one. Across the formation, the ships did not move. They did not reposition. They did not react. And yet, something was building. Not power. Not exactly. Presence. The kind you feel before you understand it. On every station. On every screen. On every system capable of receiving signal. The same thing happened. The background noise dropped. Not reduced. Removed. As if space itself had taken a breath. And was holding it. Armin didn't realize he had stopped breathing too. Until the system spoke again. Not in text. In sound. The tone. But resonant. Too structured to be random. Too controlled to be natural. He felt it? Not in his ears. In his chest. No one had given the order. But across the station, people stood still. Because something was about to happen. Not guessed. Not predicted. No. The word remained on the screen. Inevitable. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a message. It felt like a countdown. Orithel did not look at the formation. He did not need to. He knew its shape. He had approved it. Refined it. Perfected its proportions over the course of 70 years of ministry. Instead, he stood at the forward observation chamber of the throne of First Light and looked past it. At the star beyond. A small one. Yet unremarkable. The kind of star that produces life in fragile, inefficient forms. The kind that breeds species who struggle upward through confusion before arriving, eventually, at understanding. He had seen its kind before. 47 times. Not this star. Not this system. Not these people. But the pattern. The shape of the moment. Arrival. Revelation. Recognition. It always unfolded the same way. Behind him, the command chamber was silent. Not tense. Not uncertain. Prepared. Every officer at their station. Every system calibrated. Every variable accounted for. There were no unknowns here. Only timing. Translation confirmed across all monitored frequencies, his signal officer said. Reception integrity is stable. Orithel inclined his head slightly. They understand the word? Yes, High Consecrant. He allowed himself a moment of stillness. The first step was complete. The word was always first. Not because it explained anything, but because it framed everything that followed. Turned. Slowly. Orithel was tall, even by Veil standards. His body was arranged in symmetry that suggested intention rather than evolution. 4 lower limbs forming a stable base. 3 upper limbs, 2 for strength, 1 for precision. His skin shifted in subtle gradients of color as he thought. Blues. Golds. Faint pulses of something deeper beneath. A language without words. His face held 4 eyes in a horizontal line. The outer 2 fixed on distance. The inner 2 reserved for those he addressed. At the moment, they were focused inward. We will begin the broadcast, he said. No hesitation. No debate. Because there was nothing to debate. He had spent decades perfecting this moment. Not the content. That had been established long before his time. The message of the veil did not change. It did not evolve. It did not require revision. Because truth, real truth, was not something that adapted. It revealed itself. What Orithel had refined was something more precise. Delivery. The timing of each pause. The modulation of each frequency. The way the voice interacted with the biology of the listener. Because belief, he had learned early, was not an idea. It was a sensation. You did not convince a species. You made them feel as if the conclusion had already happened inside them. And then you gave that feeling a name. He had done it before. The stone-minded, resistant, had taken 19 days. The iller, fragile, perceptive, had converted within hours. The aggressive, territorial, had required demonstration. But they had all arrived. Eventually. They always did. Behind him, one of the junior officers shifted slightly. A small movement. Barely noticeable. Orithel registered it anyway. Not fear. Anticipation. He allowed it. Even among the veil, this moment held weight. Because it was not conquest. It was confirmation. Begin transmission, he said. The chamber dimmed. Not completely. Just enough. Systems aligned. Channels opened. Not from a single source. From everywhere. Between the ships. Within the formation, across frequencies that did not normally intersect, the voice did not originate. It emerged. Orithel closed his eyes. Not out of uncertainty. Out of familiarity. He had felt this moment before. The silence before the first word. The precise instant where a species still believed they were alone. Then the voice spoke. We are the veil. It did not echo. It did not project. It existed. Before your star burned, we burned. Across the command chamber, no one moved. Before your world formed, we built. Orithel felt the resonance move through the system. Not electronically. Biologically. Measured. Expected. Perfect. You have been alone in your confusion. The pause. Exactly calibrated. For long enough. He knew what was happening on the other side. He had studied it. Refined it. Perfected it. Heart rates increasing. Muscle tension shifting. Breathing patterns changing. Not fear. Not yet. Something earlier. Recognition. We are your makers. Another pause. Slightly longer. We are your purpose. The chamber remained still. No one needed to speak. Because the outcome was already known. You may now know peace. Final modulation. Final alignment. Because you are known. The transmission ended. Cleanly. No fade. No distortion. Just silence. Orithel opened his eyes. Behind him, the officers remained at their stations. Composed. Certain. He turned back toward the observation chamber. Toward the yellow star. Toward the species that, at this exact moment, were beginning to understand. They will respond, his signal officer said quietly. Orithel inclined his head again. Yes, he said. Because they always did. He looked out at the formation. At the ships arranged in perfect meaning. At the words still written across the dark. Inevitable. And for the first time in this cycle, he allowed himself a single thought. Not doubt. Not uncertainty. Something simpler. Expectation. They will respond, he repeated. Because every species, no matter how primitive, no matter how confused, eventually reached the same conclusion. He had built his entire life on that truth. And it had never, not once, been wrong. The transmission ended. For 8 seconds, nothing happened. No reply. No countersignal. No movement from the human systems. Across the Veil fleet, sensors remained locked on the same region of space. Waiting. Orithel stood in silence. Not impatient. He understood this phase. There was always a delay. The moment after revelation. When a species attempted to reconcile what they had just experienced with everything they believed before it. It never lasted long. Behind him, one of the officers spoke. Signal latency suggests they are processing. Yes, Orithel said. He did not turn. They are. On Kepler Station Bravo. The silence felt different. Not reverent. Not stunned. Interrupted. Lieutenant Armin sat at his console, staring at the waveform of the transmission still looping in the system buffer. He replayed it once. Then again. Not because he didn't understand it. Because he did. He opened a new terminal. Pulled up the contact protocol interface. Standard procedure. The same one used for unknown probes. Unregistered vessels. First contact anomalies. His fingers moved across the screen. Steady. Behind him, someone said, "Did that just?" "Yeah," another voice replied. No one finished the sentence. Because finishing it would require choosing a category. And there wasn't one yet. Armin selected. Form 7C, Unverified Entity First Contact. The system prompted. Classification status, unknown. He left it. Biological type, unknown. Left blank. Technological level, undetermined. He paused. Then entered. Advanced, further data required. Across the station floor, a junior officer let out a quiet breath. "Doing paperwork?" he asked. Armin didn't look up. "Yes." The system prompted. Intent of contact. He considered that. Briefly. Then selected. Declarative/non-negotiated claim. "Should we respond to what they said?" someone asked. Armin finally looked up. "That is the response," he said. He returned to the terminal. Requested information. Origin system coordinates. Command structure identification. Vessel classification and count. Technological disclosure, if applicable. He filled each field. Calmly. As if this were routine. Because it was. Not this situation. But the process. He reached the final field. Contact urgency. He hovered for a moment. Then selected. Standard priority. Behind him, someone laughed. Not loudly. Not mockingly. But unexpectedly. Armin didn't react. He attached the sensor logs. The waveform of the transmission. The formation data. Then he pressed. The message left the station. Traveled across the same space. Through the same formation. Through the same presence. And arrived at the center of the Veil fleet. On the throne of First Light. The signal officer froze. Not physically. Internally. High consecrant. Orthel turned. There is a response. Of course there was. He stepped forward. Display it. The message appeared. Formatted. Structured. Orthel read it once. Then again. There was no acknowledgement of the revelation. No recognition. No submission. No fear. It was a form. A request for classification. A request for identification. Request for information. At the bottom, a note. Thank you for initiating contact with the Human Expeditionary Compact. The pause. A representative will respond within 72 standard hours. The chamber remained silent. Not the prepared silence from before. Something else. Orthel read it a third time. Slowly. Carefully. They are asking. He stopped. Because the sentence did not complete. They are asking us to identify ourselves, the signal officer said. Yes. Another officer stepped forward. High consecrant, perhaps the translation. The translation is correct. Orthel's voice was calm. Too calm. He looked at the message again. At the structure. At the tone. At the complete absence of fundus. They did not respond to the revelation, he said. No. They did not acknowledge the claim. No. They did not. He stopped again. Because there was no framework for what had happened. They sent a request. Across the chamber. Subtle shifts. Not fear. Not yet. But something adjacent to it. Orthel turned back toward the observation chamber. Toward the star. Toward the formation. Toward the species that should have already begun to understand. They will correct this, one of the generals said. Orthel did not respond immediately. Because he was thinking. Not about the message. About the absence inside it. No hesitation. No recognition. He had never seen that before. Not once. They will correct this, the general repeated. Orthel nodded slowly. Yes, he said. But the word did not carry the same certainty it had before. Prepare a secondary transmission, he said. Clarify the message. Behind him, the officers moved immediately. Because this was a deviation. And deviations required correction. Orthel remained still. Looking at the star. At the species that had just been told. They were not alone. And had responded. With paperwork. He felt something then. Not confusion. Not exactly. Something smaller. Sharper. A disruption in expectation. He did not have a word for it. But he knew this. This was not how it was supposed to begin. On Kepler Station Bravo. Armin leaned back in his chair. The message sent. But. Behind him, the room slowly began to move again. People speaking. Quietly. Not panicking. Not celebrating. Adjusting. Coffee? Someone asked. Armin nodded. Yes. Because whatever had just arrived. Whatever had just spoken. Whatever had just declared itself. Could wait. There were procedures. And procedures were how you handled things that didn't make sense. On his screen, the words still hovered. Inevitable. Armin looked at it. Then minimized the window. Because for now, it wasn't. Orthel did not order an attack. Attacks were for equals. Was not that. They did not understand, one of the generals said. Orthel stood still for a moment. Not disagreeing. but refining. They did not recognize, he said. There was a difference. Understanding could be taught. Recognition had to be felt. He turned from the observation chamber. Prepare a demonstration, he said. No elaboration. None was needed. Across the fleet, one vessel detached from formation. It did not break the pattern. It moved within it, sliding into position with the same deliberate precision that had written the word across space. The vessel was designated Sacred Evidence. Its purpose was singular. Not combat. Not transport. Proof. On Kepler Station Bravo, the movement registered immediately. Contact repositioning, Armin said. The display zoomed in. One ship, larger than the others, moving toward the outer edge of the system. Trajectory, someone asked. Armin checked. Intercepting an uninhabited satellite, he said. The moon was small, roughly 700 kilometers in diameter. No atmosphere. No biosignatures. Just rock. The kind of object no one paid attention to, because it didn't matter. Until now. Are they targeting it? A junior officer asked. No weapons signatures, Armin said. Then, after a beat. Yet. On the throne of First Light, Orithel watched the alignment complete. Confirm absence of life, he said. Confirmed, came the reply. Because they were not careless. Because this was not destruction. It was instruction. Begin, Orithel said. The weapon did not fire. Not in any way human systems recognized. There was no beam. No projectile. No visible discharge. Instead, the space around the moon tightened. On Kepler Station Bravo, every sensor spiked at once. Gravitational anomaly, someone shouted. Armin's screen flooded with data. Mass readings fluctuating. Density calculations failing. Is it collapsing? Another voice said. No, Armin stopped. Because yes, to us. The moon did not explode. It did not crack. It did not break apart. It folded. Slowly. Impossibly. Its surface drawing inward. Uniformly. Every point moving toward its center at the same time. Mountains flattening. Crust compressing. Structure rewriting itself under pressure no natural force could produce. For minutes. 4 minutes and 17 seconds. On the display, the moon shrank. Not disintegrating. Condensing. It stopped. Where there had been a rough, irregular body, there was now a sphere. Perfect. Smooth. Reflective. 1/4 the original diameter. Spinning slowly. As if nothing had happened. Silence. Across every human station. Every observer. Every system. No one spoke. Not because they didn't understand. Because they did. On the throne of First Light, Orithel felt the familiar sensation settle into place. This was the moment. The turning point. Where uncertainty ended. And recognition began. They will respond, one of the generals said. With certainty. Orithel nodded. Yes, he said. Because they always did. On Kepler Station Bravo, Armin stared at the sphere. At the place where a moon had been. At the data still streaming across his screen. Log it, he said. His voice was steady. Professional. Classification, the system prompted. He paused. Then entered. Gravitational compression event. Unknown technology. Do we respond? Someone asked. Armin looked at the sphere again. Then at the terminal. Yes, he said. He opened a new channel. Not military. Not defensive. Scientific. From Dr. Elian Rao, Department of Astrophysics. Armin blinked. That was fast, someone muttered. The message populated automatically. Formal. Structured. The Human Expeditionary Compact acknowledges the demonstration. The pause. The observed compression event represents a previously undocumented application of gravitational manipulation. Another pause. We request permission to study the resulting structure. Silence. They're asking to study it, the junior officer said. Yes. After that. Armin nodded. Yes. The message continued. If direct access is not possible, we request technical documentation or observational data regarding the methodology used. And then, we believe this event presents significant research value. Armin read it once. Then again. Send it, he said. On the throne of first light. The reply arrived. Faster this time. There had been no hesitation at all. The signal officer handed it to Orithel. Carefully. He read it. Then again. The chamber remained silent. They are, one of the generals began. He stopped. Because there was no correct word. Orithel looked at the message. At the request. At the tone. There was no fear. No reverence. No submission. Interest. They are asking how it works, the signal officer said. Yes. Orithel looked at the sphere. Perfect. Immaculate. Undeniable. This demonstration had converted 3 species in a single cycle. It had ended resistance before it began. It had been final. And now, they want to study it, the general said. Orithel said nothing. Because something had shifted. Not in the fleet. Not in the humans. In the expectation. He looked at the message again. At the calm. At the absence. At the complete refusal. To react the way they were supposed to. And for the first time, in 70 years, Orithel felt something he could not immediately classify. It wasn't doubt. Not yet. But it was no longer certainty. On Kepler Station Bravo, Armin leaned back slightly. The message sent. The sphere still rotating in the distance. The fleet still holding position. Coffee? The same voice asked again. Armin nodded. Yes. Because whatever this was, whatever they were, whatever they could do, did not change the next step. Observe. Record. Understand. On his screen, the words still existed. Inevitable. Armin glanced at it. Then returned to his data. Because now, it felt less like a conclusion, and more like a hypothesis. The second day was quieter. That was the part that stayed with Armin. Not the fleet. Not the compressed moon. Not the words still archived in every system. The quiet. Because nothing, on paper, had changed. The Veil fleet remained in position. 47 vessels suspended at the edge of mapped space. The sphere that had once been a moon continued its slow rotation. No additional transmissions. No movement. No escalation. And yet, everything had changed. On Kepler Station Bravo, shift rotations continued. At 6 o'clock, the next duty cycle began. People arrived. Logged in. Checked systems. Like they always did. Morning, someone said. Morning. Armin sat at his station. Pulled up the overnight logs. No new anomalies. No new movements. No new declarations of divinity. That's it, the junior officer asked. For now, Armin said. He took a sip of coffee. It was slightly bitter. The station's supply chain had been inconsistent for weeks. That had not changed either. Across the deck, 2 technicians were arguing quietly. It's not supposed to be in engineering, one said. I didn't put it there. You always put things where they don't belong. It's a coffee mug, not a classified asset. Armin didn't look up. Because the argument made sense. In a way the rest of it didn't. At 8:12, a new request came in. Not military. Not defensive. Academic. From University of New Geneva, Department of Astrophysics. Armin opened it. Regarding the gravitational compression event. He read the message. Then leaned back slightly. Another one, he said. Another what? The junior officer asked. Research request. For the moon? Yes. There was a pause. Seriously? Armin nodded. Crossed the network. More requests followed. Different institutions. Different departments. All asking variations of the same thing. Can we study it? Can we measure it? Can we understand how it works? No one asked, are they gods? Should we surrender? That absence was becoming noticeable. On the throne of first light, Orithel reviewed the incoming human transmissions. There were many now. Not coordinated. Not unified. Individual. Fragmented. Curious. They are still requesting access, the signal officer said. Orithel did not respond immediately. He had expected delay. He had expected resistance. Even brief denial. He had not expected this. They are behaving as though, the officer hesitated. As though, Orithel prompted. As though this is a problem to solve. Silence. Orithel considered that carefully, because it implied something fundamental. They did not see the demonstration as final. They saw it as data. On Kepler Station Bravo, Armin pulled up the fleet again. 47 ships. Unmoving. He zoomed in. Nothing changed. No energy spikes. No repositioning. They're just sitting there, the junior officer said. Yes. Waiting. Armin considered that, then shook his head slightly. No. For what? Armin looked at the screen. At the ships. At the space between them. For us to react, he said. Cross the station. Life continued. Lunch rotations. System checks. Routine diagnostics. Someone dropped a tray in the mess. The sound echoed, louder than it should have. People looked up, then went back to eating. There were still things to do. On the Covenant, far closer to the edge of the contact zone, Admiral Sarah Vance stood on the command deck. She had been in service for 31 years. She had seen first contacts, failed negotiations, species that smiled before attacking, species that attacked before speaking. She had never seen this. Status, she said. Commander Ibera didn't look up from his station. 47 contacts holding position. No change in formation. Intent. The pause. Unknown. Vance nodded. She picked up her coffee. Took a sip. Made a small face. Still bad, she said. Yes, Admiral. She walked to the main display. Looked at the fleet. They're waiting for fear, she said. Ibra glanced at her. Ma'am? They've done this before, she said. Show up. Make a statement. Demonstrate power. She gestured slightly toward the sphere. Then wait. For what? Ibra asked. Vance looked at the ships. For the other side to decide they've already lost. Silence. Ibra nodded slowly. And we haven't. Vance took another sip of coffee. No, she said. On Kepler Station Bravo, Armin watched the same fleet. Same data. Same silence. He thought about the word. Inevitable. He thought about the moon. He thought about the message they had sent. He minimized the window again. Because there was a report due in 6 minutes. And reports still mattered. Cross-human space. The reaction followed a pattern. Not organized. Not directed. Natural. News feeds filled with analysis. Speculation. Interviews. Clips of the formation. Clips of the sphere. Clips of the original transmission. Within hours, there were edits. Music added. Captions inserted. Within a day, there were jokes. Not cruel. Not dismissive. But human. Because when something is too large to process, humans do one of two things. They panic. They laugh. And this was not quite panic. On the Covenant, Ibra watched one of the clips. The Admiral's press statement. Big ships, she had said. The pause. Marketing problem. He replayed it. Twice. Then closed the file. Accurate, he muttered. Back on the throne of First Light, Orithel stood in silence. The fleet still. The formation intact. The demonstration complete. And yet, no submission. No recognition. Activity. Questions. Movement. That did not align with any known response pattern. He looked at the star again. Ordinary. The kind of system that should have followed the same path as the others. He had built his life on that certainty. And now, something was not aligning. Not breaking. Not yet. But bending. He did not have a word for that either. And that was beginning to matter. On Kepler Station Bravo, Armin finished his report. Submitted it. He picked up his coffee. Took another sip. Still bitter. Behind him, the argument about the missing mug had started again. I'm telling you, it doesn't just move on its own. Then explain how it got there. I can't explain it. That's the problem. Armin allowed himself A small, almost invisible smile. Because out there, 47 ships the size of cities waited in perfect formation. And in here, someone couldn't find their coffee mug. And somehow, both things existed at the same time. And that felt right. The third day, they moved. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just enough to be noticed. On Kepler Station Bravo, the alert triggered quietly. Formation shift detected. Armin looked up immediately. Where? The system highlighted multiple vectors. Not outward. Inward. They're tightening, the junior officer said. Armin zoomed out. The formation was changing. Not breaking. Reconfiguring. The word that had been written across space, inevitable, began to distort. Not disappear. Compress. They're abandoning the message, someone said. No, Armin said slowly. They're changing it. On the throne of First Light, Orithel stood with all four eyes fixed on the scope. They do not respond correctly, one of the generals said. No, Orithel said. They do not. They laugh. They ask questions. They delay. Orithel said nothing, because all of that was true, and none of it fit. The demonstration was insufficient, another general said. The pause. We should escalate. The word hung in the chamber. Escalate. Orithel considered it. Carefully. Escalation was not doctrine. Doctrine assumed. Understanding was something else. Turned. Deploy the consecration fleet. Silence. Not disagreement. Recognition. The consecration fleet was not used. It was not needed. It was final. All 80 vessels? The lead general asked. Orithel looked at the scope. At the 47 ships already present. At the single human vessel. Still positioned inside the contact zone. Yes, he said. On Kepler Station Bravo. The alert cascade began. Yelled. Amber. Armin didn't need to read it. He could feel it. In the way the room changed. Multiple FTL signatures, someone said. Range. Close. How close? The system updated. Then updated again. Contact emergence in progress. It happened all at once. No staggered entry. No gradual buildup. Simply filled. 80 new contacts. Each one comparable in scale to the first fleet. Dropping into position in perfect synchronization. The system didn't try to count them. Not this time. Just displayed. Total contacts, 127. The number sat there. Unblinking. Uninterpretable. On the Covenant, Commander Ibra watched the same number appear on his display. He didn't speak. Didn't move. Because the math had already happened. One human ship. 127. For them. He did not say it out loud. Because saying it would not change it. Admiral Vance stood beside him. Coffee in hand. She looked at the formation. At the way it closed. They're done waiting, Ibra said quietly. Vance nodded. Yes. The new fleet did not spread out. Did not flank. Did not surround. In the traditional sense. Formed a ring. A perfect tightening circle. Around the Covenant. From certain angles. It looked like a hand. About to close. On Kepler Station Bravo. Someone whispered. They're going to fire. Armin didn't respond. Because maybe they were. Or maybe this was something worse. On the throne of First Light. Orithel watched the formation complete. One ship. At the center. They have not moved, the general said. I see that. It is deliberate. Another pause. They want us to see it. Orithel said nothing. Because that felt correct. He focused on the human vessel. Damaged. Unremarkable. Still. He had studied species his entire life. Studied their reactions. Their patterns. Their fear. Every species. Organized its fear. Belief. Structure. Submission. And if you understood that structure, you understood them. He looked at the one ship. He could not find it. Prepare weapons, he said. The order moved through the fleet instantly. Energy signatures rose. Not chaotic. Not unstable. Precise. Measured. On the Covenant. Alerts flooded the bridge. Weapons lock warnings. Energy spikes. Targeting overlays. Admiral, Ibra said. Recommended action. Vance didn't answer immediately. She looked at the formation. At the geometry. At the closing circle. She thought about something else. A room. 3 months ago. 6 people. A decision made. Quietly. Put into motion. She looked back at the display. Hold position, she said. Ibra turned. Ma'am. Hold. He hesitated. Then nodded. Yes, Admiral. Cross the bridge. No one spoke. Because they understood what that meant. No retreat. No maneuver. No visible defense. On Kepler Station Bravo. Armin watched the same thing. One ship. Not moving. Why aren't they running? The junior officer asked. Armin didn't answer. Because he didn't know. On the throne of First Light. Orithel watched the same ship. Still. Not reacting. Not even attempting. They do not understand, one of the generals said. Orithel looked at the scope. No, he said quietly. They understand. That was the problem. The weapons charged. Across 127 ships. The energy built, layered, synchronized. The kind of power that did not need precision. Because there would be nothing left to miss. On the Covenant, the alarm stabilized. No longer rising. But this was it. Ibra's jaw tightened. Slightly. Admiral? Vance didn't look at him. She was watching the display. Reading it. Like a doctor reads an X-ray. Hold, she said again. On Kepler Station Bravo. Armin stared at the screen. At the circle. At the energy. At the inevitability. That finally felt real. And for the first time, no one in the room laughed. On the throne of First Light. Orithel raised one hand. Fire. The word left his mouth. Without hesitation. Without doubt. Because this was the moment everything returned to the way it was supposed to be. And for a fraction of a second, the universe held its breath. The veil fired. It did not look like an attack. It looked like a star being born. Across 127 vessels. Every weapon system discharged at once. Not staggered. Not sequenced. Simultaneous. The combined energy output collapsed into a single point. The Covenant. On Kepler Station Bravo. Every screen went white. Sensors overloaded. Shockwave readings spiked across multiple spectrums. Someone swore. Someone else stopped breathing entirely. It's gone, the junior officer whispered. Because nothing could survive that. On the Covenant, the bridge vanished into light. Not darkness. But so bright it erased edges. Forms. Distance. The hull screamed. Not metaphorically. Actually screamed. Metal under stress. Beyond design tolerance. Producing a sound no system was built to interpret. Shields holding. Someone started. Shields dropping. Stabilizing. Ibra gripped his console. Hard enough that his fingers hurt. Vance did not move. Not because she wasn't aware. Because this was expected. The fire expanded outward. Wave after wave of energy. Layered. Overlapping. Continuous. From the outside, there was nothing left. On the throne of First Light, Orithel watched the impact. The totality of it. The finality. Was what ended conversations. Was what removed uncertainty. Inevitable. The light began to fade. Slowly. Reluctantly. Sensors recalibrated. Systems came back online. On Kepler Station Bravo. The display returned. And the contact marker was still there. No one spoke. What? The junior officer said. Because it didn't make sense. It shouldn't exist. On the Covenant, Ibra stared at his screen. Damage reports cascading. Hull integrity compromised. Port shielding reduced to critical levels. One engine. Down to 15%. Still, they were there. He swallowed. How? He whispered. Vance picked up her coffee. Took a sip. Status, she said. Ibra forced himself to focus. Ship is operational, he said. That was the word. Operational. Not intact. Not safe. Operational. The second phase began. It did not come from the front. Came from nowhere. On the throne of first light, the first impact registered as an error. A sensor glitch. An impossible vector. Contact, the signal officer said, then stopped. Because there was no contact to track. The second impact hit. Then a third. 7. All from different angles. All from inside. The formation. What is? One of the generals began. Then the scope updated. New contacts. 41. Previously unregistered. On the Covenant, Ibra's screen lit up. Multiple friendly signatures, he said. Vance didn't look surprised. Execute, she said. The strike package activated. For 9 weeks. They had been there. Hidden. Silent. Positioned inside the shadow zones created by the Veil fleet itself. Because large formations create blind spots. And blind spots can be used. The first Veil ship lost power. Not destroyed. Disabled. Then another. Then another. The hacks moved. Methodically. Weapon arrays targeted. Drive cores neutralized. Veil systems removed. Not chaos. Not destruction. Precision. On the throne of first light. The command chamber fractured. Not physically. Conceptually. They're inside the formation. How did they return fire? Weapons fired. But without targets. Because the X were coming from places that should not exist. Angles. The Veil had never needed to defend. Orithel stood still. Watching. One by one. His fleet. Stuff. Not destroyed. Not annihilated. Silenced. 8 minutes. That was the window. Minutes. For the Covenant to survive. Minutes. For the strike package to execute. Minutes. For everything to change. On the Covenant, time stretched. Every second. The hull screamed again. Lights flickered. Someone laughed. Briefly. Involuntarily. Then stopped. Ibra didn't move. Didn't blink. He just watched. As the numbers changed. Enemy contacts. 127. 89. 63. Strike package progressing, he said. His voice. Steady. Because it had to be. At 8 minutes and 40 seconds. It ended. The last impact registered. The final system went offline. Silence. On the scope. The Veil fleet was no longer a fleet. 63 vessels. Drifting. 12. Still operational. And at the center. One human ship. Damaged. Scorched. Still there. On the throne of first light. Orithel did not speak. He looked at the numbers. Looked at the formation that no longer existed. Looked at the one ship that should not exist. And for the first time, he understood something. Completely. Not tactically. That could be analyzed later. Something deeper. He had looked for their fear. And found none. Not because they were fearless. Because they acted. Despite it. The channel opened. Vance's voice came through. Level. Your move. The chamber was silent. Orithel sat down. Slowly. Like something that had been holding weight. And just realized it could not hold it anymore. He looked at his hands. At the color of his skin. Drifting into something he had never seen before. He found the word. Finally. It was not confusion. It was not doubt. It was understanding. Do not return fire, he said. The generals froze. High Consecrant. Do not return fire. Cross the battlefield. The remaining 12 ships did not move. And for the first time, in 4,000 years, the Veil stuff on the Covenant, Ibra exhaled. Slowly. They're not firing, he said. Vance picked up her coffee. It had gone cold. She drank it anyway. Good, she said. And just like that, the inevitable wasn't. The 12 remaining Veil vessels held position for 9 hours. They did not advance. They did not retreat. They did not speak. They simply remained there. In a tighter formation now. The instinctive shape of something that had learned too late what it should have feared. Around them drifted the wreckage of certainty. 63 silent ships. 18 more stripped of movement and weapons, alive but unable to act. The geometry of divine authority, broken apart and left floating in the dark for everyone to see. On the Covenant, no one celebrated. That mattered. Not because the moment was not enormous. To us. Not because the victory was unclear. It wasn't. But because everyone on that ship understood something simple. The battle had ended. The meaning of it had not. Commander Ibra asked twice whether they should press the advantage. Reduce the 12 remaining Veil ships to the same helpless stillness as the others. Finish the thing completely. Both times, Admiral Vance said no. She did not elaborate. She did not explain. She simply looked at the scope and said no the way she said everything that had already become true. Adi, watching from his station, hands back on his console now, steady again, thought he understood. You did not interrupt a lesson while it was still being learned. Not if the lesson was the point. Across the scope, the 12 Veil ships sat in the silence of their own revised reality. And on the other side of that silence, something else had already begun moving. Not in the contact zone. Far beyond it. Inside the Dominion. The first anomaly came from a system called Vethran. It was not a military event. Not even close. A tribute shipment did not launch. That was all. A routine transfer of resources that had occurred every cycle for generations simply failed to happen. No warning. No declaration. No rebellion broadcast. Just absence. Heck, intelligence flagged it. Noted it. Moved on. Then came a second anomaly from another Dominion system. A maintenance request from a consecration temple reported that its central illumination array, the mechanism used to deliver the daily revelation, had been dismantled by local labor crews. The report had been filed in the ordinary administrative tone people use when they are describing something completely extraordinary, as if it were a plumbing issue. That got flagged harder. Still, it was only 2 incidents. 2 oddities do not make a pattern. Then came 6 more. Then 11. Then 47. By the end of the first week, no one in intelligence was calling them anomalies anymore. They were calling them what they were. A cascade. Across all 11 species under Veil authority, the same thing was happening in different ways at different speeds according to local culture, local risk, and how much courage each system could afford. Tribute shipments were delayed. Then refused. Temples were emptied. Some were dismantled. Some were left standing but abandoned, lights off, altars cleared, revelation frequencies broadcasting into empty rooms. Sacred objects were packed into careful containers and returned to Veil administrative offices with notes attached. Polite notes, off. That was the human part of the contagion, Heck intelligence said later. Not the weapons. The tone. The Thorath, stone-minded, sincere, stubborn Thorath who had once taken 19 days to convert, returned 11 sacred relics in 11 nested containers. Their note read, "We have been considering the recent events. We believe we require more time." That sentence circulated through Heck analysis for a full day because everyone recognized how much was hiding inside it. Not rage. Not dramatic rebellion. Not even hatred. Just reconsideration. And reconsideration was fatal to systems built on untouchable certainty. The most important transmission came on the 15th day. It came from the Urath, a small species on a single moon in the outer reaches of Dominion space. Population, 12 million. Military capacity, none. Strategic value, negligible. Time under Veil rule, 600 years. They had the least reason to move first. The most reason to stay quiet. So naturally, they were the ones who said it cleanest. They hijacked the Veil holy frequency. Not for a speech. Not for a manifesto. Not for a plea. For one word. That was all. One word on the channel that had for centuries belonged only to divine declaration. One word from a species with no fleet, no leverage, no guarantee of protection. One word from people who had heard the revelation all their lives and had, at some point after the battle, realized that the word they needed had existed in their language the entire time. They had simply forgotten they were allowed to use it on something that large. In the Heck intercept room, Analyst Park read the translation aloud. Quietly. Respectfully. Like the kind of thing that deserved not to be performed. When she finished, no one said anything for a while. Then she said, mostly to herself, 12 million people. No warships. 600 years. Nobody improved on that. There was nothing to improve. On the Covenant, Adi was writing a letter to his younger sister in pieces between monitoring checks. A paragraph at a time. A thought between reports. He wrote about the stale bread. He wrote about the missing coffee mug. He wrote about the moment 127 contacts became 12. He wrote about how fear had been present the whole time and how that had turned out not to be the important part. He stopped several times trying to find the right sentence for what had really happened. Eventually he wrote, I think maybe the whole story is that we showed them the word still worked. He looked at that line for a long time before saving the document. On the Vale homeworld, Orithel addressed the Dominion Council in a closed chamber without ceremony. He told them everything. The Form 7C. The research requests. The jokes. The ambassador asking for 60 days. The one ship. The 8 minutes and 40 seconds. The 12 surviving vessels passing back through systems that were no longer behaving like systems that believed. He did not frame it kindly. He did not soften it. He did not rescue himself with rhetoric. He had spent 70 years mastering rhetoric. He did not use it now. When he finished, the council sat in silence. At last, an elder member asked the obvious question. What action do you recommend? Orithel looked at them for a long moment. Then he said the sentence that would be quoted for centuries afterward in 300 languages. We have spent 4,000 years mistaking compliance for belief. No one answered. Not because they disagreed. Because they understood, all at once, how expensive agreement was about to become. Later, alone in his quarters, Orithel stood by a different window than the one on the throne of First Light. This one looked out on a pale home sky rather than a yellow frontier star. He looked at his own hands and thought about the Velrath, about the Urith, about the species who had worshipped sincerely inside a structure that might still have contained meaning even if it had not contained truth. He did not reach a conclusion. That, too, mattered. The old system had offered conclusions first and questions never. Now the questions had arrived. And unlike fleets, questions were very hard to destroy. On Earth, on stations, on colonies, the public conversation mutated the way public conversations always do. Some treated the battle as military history. Some as theology. Some as comedy. Some as the beginning of a new doctrine for first contact. Clips of Vance saying big ships. Marketing problem. Continued circulating with absurd levels of commentary attached. Scholars debated whether the Veil had ever truly believed their own revelation. Engineers argued about the strike package angles. Diplomats wrote papers about bureaucratic refusal as a strategic instrument. Humanity, having stared down a god empire, did what it always did after surviving something large. It made meaning in 12 directions at once and argued with itself in public. But deeper than the debate, something simpler had entered the galaxy. The proof. Not that oppressive systems fall quickly. Not that courage removes fear. Not that one battle solves the moral architecture of empire. Nothing so convenient. The proof was smaller and therefore stronger. That refusal was possible. That it could be spoken aloud. That it had weight. That the weight was survivable. That was what traveled. Not the battle footage. Not the debris field. Not even the image of one battered ship holding under impossible fire. Those mattered, but only because of what they demonstrated. The thing that spread was the recovered memory of a word. Not no because victory was guaranteed. No because agreement was not. No because all was not ownership. No because survival without dignity had finally begun to look, to some species, less stable than risk. Weeks later, as salvage teams catalogued the broken remains of the Consecration fleet and the Covenant still sat scorched and listing slightly in dock, Adi finally finished the letter to his sister. At the end he wrote, "Stay curious about the aliens. But don't be afraid of them in the wrong way. The ones worth understanding are the ones trying to understand us back. The ones who aren't, we've handled worse." Then, after a pause, he added one more line. "I think the battle was 8 minutes. The word is going to last much longer." He sent it. Then he went back to work. Because that, too, was part of the formula. Not just defiance. Not just brilliance. Continuation. The stubborn, unimpressive, undefeatable habit of continuing. Coffee getting cold. Bread going stale. Reports being filed. Questions being asked. Ships being repaired. Children reading letters and turning them into futures. Civilizations discovering that silence on a holy frequency belongs, eventually, to the people listening. Far away, on the Urith moon, the revelation channel remained empty. Some people found the silence unsettling. Some found it beautiful. Most found it unfinished. Which was honest. Freedom usually sounds unfinished at first. Like a room after a machine has been turned off. Like your own thoughts arriving louder than expected. Like the dark above you belonging, suddenly and completely, to no one who demands you look away. And in that dark, the stars burned the way they had always burned. Not as proof. Not as promise. Not as witnesses. Just as stars. Ancient, indifferent, real. The veil had wanted to own the meaning of the sky. The humans had not taken it from them. They had only shown everyone else that meaning was never theirs to grant. That was the final reversal. Not that gods had been defeated, but that they had been resized. Reduced from inevitability to proposal. From absolute truth to something that could be answered. From command to claim. And once a thing can be answered, it can be refused. That was enough. It turned out, in the end, that enough was all the galaxy had needed.